Hello and welcome on the festive tech calendar. First of all, I wish you a Merry Christmas, hoping you enjoy your Christmas day. In this session, we'll talk about Windows Sandbox and how to make it awesome. We will see what is Windows Sandbox and also how to customize it and how to use it with PowerShell, configure it and make it your best friend for your test. A bit about me before to start. My name is Damien Van Robaeys. I'm a system engineer at Medsys and I'm also a Microsoft MVP since 5 years now. I'm working with PowerShell, Intune, MS Graph, MDG, MECM, and Windows Sandbox, and all things relative to the deployment. You can follow me on my Twitter there or on my blog systemdeploy.com. I did some different tool uh, that you can use with Windows Sandbox, so don't hesitate to contact me on Twitter if you have any question. All example on preprint of this session will be available on my GitHub on this link. You can find also some of my blog posts on my blog on this link. So now let's start. What is Windows Sandbox? First, a prerequisite of Windows Sandbox. You have to run on Windows 10 or 11, and Windows Sandbox doesn't run on Windows Home Edition. You need to enable virtualization in your BIOS and to at least 4 gigabit of RAM and at least 1 gigabit of free disk space. And of course, SSD disk is recommended. Windows Sandbox is a Windows feature that you can enable through the Windows GUI, and it has been implemented in Windows 93. Windows Sandbox allows you to launch an isolated environment of your operating system. This environment will run separately from your host machine. It's look like a virtual machine, but difference is nothing is installed on your host computer. With a virtual machine, it will create a hard disk, a VHD, something like this, that can take a huge space, and your Windows Sandbox doesn't take much space. It's really cool. Uh, Things to note that is when you close Windows Sandbox, everything you have done into it is cleared. If you have add application, install application, change registry, change background, etc., everything will be cleared. And if you run again the Windows Sandbox, you will have something like a new environment. Things important to note too is that you can run only one instance of Windows Sandbox, so you can run two instances at the same time. Advantage and inconvenience of a Windows Sandbox. We'll see first pros. Windows Sandbox use an isolated environment of your operating system, and you can run suspicious exe file without being afraid of um, making something on your host computer. There is no need to create a virtual machine, and nothing is installed on your host computer. Inconvenient now is not really an inconvenient, but everything is cleared in the sandbox after closing it. So if you want to have something like a lab, you will need to create a configuration file. We will see this later. And you can do whatever you want on Windows Sandbox, like enable a Windows feature, running Microsoft Store, etc. When to use it and how Windows Sandbox can help you. Don't worry, be happy and safe. First of all, with application. Windows Sandbox is useful to test all your application file like exe, MSI, etc. In my case, I use it a lot to test some application, silent installation, script installation, etc. You can copy easily a file from your host computer, just copy paste and copy it and your paste it on your Windows Sandbox. Then you will be able to run the application, exe, MSI, etc. on Windows Sandbox. You can also run script, PowerShell, VBS, etc. in separated environments, and this won't affect your host computer. Meaning if you have a script that does a lot of things and you won't do this on your host computer, you can use Windows Sandbox for this. Windows Sandbox also allows you to run a suspicious web link or application. For instance, if you have downloading something but you are not sure of this, you can first copy it on your Sandbox and run it, and this won't affect your host computer. We will not see it in a demo. We will test application and test some script, PowerShell and VBS. Now let's go. We will first open Windows Sandbox on my host computer. Windows Sandbox, it can take a while to run. You have this Windows Sandbox splash screen, and then we will run some file. So, waiting for Windows Sandbox to run. Okay, Windows Sandbox is like this. Now, I will test some file, like test PS1 file, PowerShell file, and VBS. Both files will just display a message box. Click copy paste, and you have file available on your Windows Sandbox. Then I will run a MSI file and exe file. Exe file is for Notepad++ and MSI for WinRAR. So let's copy paste there and okay. Now I will first run the Notepad++ exe installer on my Windows Sandbox. Just to click OK, you have a possibility to choose what you want to install. OK, agree, Notepad, next. OK, Windows Notepad++ is installed. Now let's go to the same with WinRAR. Install, click. OK. Now go to Control Panel. OK. And there you have our installed program. Now, let's do the same with the PowerShell script. We'll first run the VBS file. This will just display a total message box. Double click, Merry Christmas. Now, let's do the same with the PowerShell file. Do a right click, run on PowerShell. And this will display a message box with the name of the current user. Current user of the Windows Sandbox is WDA utility account. Okay, now we have seen that we can run some file directly on Windows Sandbox, just with a copy paste from your host on Windows Sandbox. This is really useful. Now, how to install Windows Sandbox? On a real device, you can use the Windows UI to install Windows Sandbox. Go to Control Panel and enable, go to Turn Windows Feature or on off and enable the Windows Sandbox feature. You can also do this with PowerShell, an automated way, with some commandlet. The feature name for Windows Sandbox is Container Disposable Client VM. So just use the commandlet enable Windows optional feature with a feature name and online and no restart parameter. If you want to do this on a virtual machine like Hyper-V, you have first to turn off the virtual machine, get the virtual machine name, and enable virtualization on your virtual machine if it's not. Then last step is to enable Windows feature on the virtual machine. To enable the virtualization on the virtual machine, just use the commandlet set VM processor with VM name and use the parameter expose virtualization extension with a true. Then we will install Windows Sandbox with enable Windows optional feature commandlet with a feature name and online and no restart parameters. You can also run Sandbox as standard user. Before, this wasn't possible. From now, you can do this with standard user. If you are still not able to do this, cool workaround is to add the current user in the Hyper-V admin group. This will allow the user to run Windows Sandbox without prompting USE or for administrative privilege. You can also do this with PowerShell using a commandlet add local group member in the Hyper-V administrator group. Now, let's install it on a quick VM virtual machine. So, I have this virtual machine, Windows 10. I will first turn off and I will, okay, do this. Name of the virtual machine is W10. Okay, go to PowerShell. There, I will stop my Windows Sandbox. Okay. Now, I will check the virtualization extension state on my virtual machine. There, it will get VM processor with the V virtual machine name. Still, its status is false. No, so not enable. We will now enable it. Okay, let's check again. No, it's true. So now it means we can enable Windows Sandbox on the virtual machine. Click on Connect. I'm logging. I will enable Windows Sandbox from the Windows UI. Go to Control Panel. Okay. Of course, I can do it with PowerShell. Go to Program. Go to Turn Windows feature on or off. Then choose Windows Sandbox. Okay, check it. Click on OK. And Windows feature is now enabled. Windows Sandbox is now enabled, and it requires a restart. So I will restart my device. Started. I will log in again. Now let's check Windows Sandbox from my virtual machine. Oops. Windows Sandbox. Okay, click on Windows Sandbox. It will run the splash screen first and then Windows Sandbox. Let's close it and continue. When you close Windows Sandbox, you have a message running you that when you close Windows Sandbox, everything will be discarded and permanently lost. Okay, close the virtual machine. So, you can also, of course, deploy it in enterprise through Intune or MECM. For this, you can use with Intune Win32 application or a proactive remediation script. In our case, we'll use a PowerShell script from Intune that enable Windows Sandbox through the commandlet, Windows feature for the commandlet, and also use a proactive remediation which installs them on devices which have not already Windows Sandbox feature. Um, configure the script as system because you need admin right to enable Windows feature, and don't forget to add a no restart parameter. With MECM, use an application, a package, or just a simple script. Use also run also the script as system and install the Sandbox feature with no restart. Sandbox and configuration file. What is a configuration file? A configuration file allows you to run a sandbox with some configuration directly uh, implemented in the Windows Sandbox. By default, when you run a Windows Sandbox, there is nothing uh, into it, nothing installed like a software, nothing, no shortcut, etc. You can use configuration file to run, for instance, a Windows Sandbox with a specific folder shared from your host computer to the Windows Sandbox, run a sandbox with a specific application installed directly when you run Windows Sandbox, run a sandbox with or without audio, network, printer, clipboard, meaning you can share your printer from your host computer to the Windows Sandbox, and you can also don't share it or enable network share from your host to Windows Sandbox and also disable it. You can run Sandbox with PS1 file, exe, MSC, launch as a startup of the Windows Sandbox. A configuration Windows Sandbox configuration file is a file formatted as XML with a WSB file extension. Running the WSB file will launch the Windows Sandbox with the appropriate configuration. And of course, it won't impact the default Windows Sandbox and your host computer. When you run, for instance, a WSB file with a program installed on the Windows Sandbox, it will just install this program in a specific sandbox. When you close it, everything is cleared. And when you run the default Windows Sandbox without WSB file, you will have something clean. It allows you, for instance, to have a sandbox for different cases. Like, I want to run a sandbox with a specific application. You can imagine a sandbox with some pen testing tool and in a WSB file. So just run the WSB file and this will run Windows Sandbox with some application installed. Or also, you can also, for instance, imagine a WSB file that will automatically unroll the Windows Sandbox into Intune. We will see this in a demo. WSB properties. A WSB file can contain different properties node because it's an XML file. Each property will allow you to set a specific option. The main node is configuration. You have first to open it and close it, just like this. Then add appropriate properties in the file. There are default properties from Microsoft. VGPU allows you to enable or disable the virtual GPU. There are some properties for networking, which allows you to enable or disable network access within the sandbox from your host computer. You can add map folder, which allows you to share a folder from your host computer to the Windows Sandbox. Logon command, which allows you to run a specific command line like VBS file, PowerShell file. Audio or retro video input allows you to share the microphone or webcam with the Windows Sandbox. Printer redirection allows you to share the printer from your host computer to the Windows Sandbox, etc. There are different kind of properties. Here are some examples of WSB sample file. There, a WSB configuration with a specific folder shared from the host computer. This configuration, like you can see, this is XML format, will share the download folder from my host computer to the Windows Sandbox with the read-only set to true, meaning from the Windows Sandbox you can just access to the folder and not create something into it. And then when you open the Windows Sandbox, you will have the download folder mapped on the desktop on the Windows Sandbox. You can also enable networking. This is an example. We set the networking node to enable, and there also printer redirection to enable. And in the Windows Sandbox, this will result like this. You will have your printer from your host computer and the network icon enable. If you disable both, in your printer control panel, you won't see the printer from your host computer, and the network icon will be disabled with the map icon. You can also um, create a WSB file allowing you to run a specific application. There, I created a WSB file which will run a VMware application. So, first step is to share the host folder which will contain the exe file, and add a command to run the exe file. And in the Windows Sandbox, when you will run the Windows Sandbox, it will by default run the exe installer without in silent mode, because you didn't add a silent switch in the command. But you can do this. We will see this. Now, let's see WSB creation manual way in a demo. We will open there our WSB file. There, this is a WSB file that will just oops, sorry, will just share. We'll choose XML for a better view. Share the download from the folder from my host computer with the Windows Sandbox. Okay. And then you have a WSB file. Just do a double click on it, and this will run the splash screen and then the Windows Sandbox. Now, Windows Sandbox is open with the download folder from my host computer on the desktop. If I check it, read-only is set to true, so if I want to create a new folder, I cannot. Let's close it, and we will change this to read-only false. So I will be able to create something in the download folder from my sharing from my host computer, and add content directly from the Windows Sandbox. Okay, Windows Sandbox is running. Click on download. Now I will try to create a new folder, and I'm now able to create a new folder directly on the download folder on my host computer. Now, we'll do the same with networking and printer properties. There an example with networking and printer disable. Let's run it. Okay, Windows Sandbox is running. Now let's go to printer and scanner, and I won't see my printer from my host computer. And there, the network icon is disabled with a map. Now let's enable networking and printer redirection. Click enable and run again the networking printer WSB file. Okay, now let's go back to printer and scanner, and I will see my printer from my host computer there. And there you can see that network is enabled and you have access to internet. Another example with which will just run an exe file. Okay, I will enable some properties and share the download folder which contain my exe file and just run the exe file with just no silent install command switch. So click on the WSB file and this will run my sandbox, and when the sandbox will be run it will ask me for the program installation. Okay, Windows Sandbox is running and the exe is being installed. It will prompt for the installation. Okay, click on next, etc. I won't install it, but it's just to show you. So, Windows Sandbox configuration file may be really useful because you can have different Windows Sandbox environment for what you want to do. For instance, specific Windows Sandbox for pen test, Windows Sandbox for specific application, Intune test, etc. We have seen the manual way. Now let's see how to automate the the creation of WSB file with a quick GUI. This is a Windows Sandbox editor, a tool I created with PowerShell and WPF, and which is available on my GitHub on this link. It allows you to create or load an existing WSB file and set properties, add a map folder, add some command, and run it directly. We will see this now in a demo. Windows Sandbox. Of course, you can find it on my blog. So, it looks like this. You have the basic information, which allows you to set the sandbox name, set the path where the WSB file which will be saved, set some properties of the sandbox. There you have a possibility to add a share folder, and then there you can add a command with different options: PS1 file, VBS file, exe file, MS file. And then there you have an overview of your WSB configuration file. For instance, I will create a WSB file that will just run my PowerShell file, which will display a message box with the name of the logon user. So I will click on sandbox name, festive test. Sandbox path will be on desktop. I will enable networking, not. Disable. Clipboard, disable. Printer, disable. Go to overview. You have option disable there. Now I will choose my PowerShell script. Choose PowerShell script. Go to test. Okay, this is this file. You can see the command line there, and I will choose the folder where the PS1 file is located. So go to my session for events, festive tech calendar, file, etc. Okay, and you can set to read only or not. You can also change properties there, okay, read-only or not, etc. We'll set let by default. You have your command, okay, and then there you have the option to choose if you want to run Sandbox after doing executing creating Sandbox file. So I will enable it. Now click on create Sandbox file. Okay, your sandbox has been created and will be launched automatically. So I will minimize it and you can see that my Windows Sandbox is running in background. Now Windows Sandbox is running and my test PS1 file will be launched with the name of the current user in a message box. Okay, now I will load an existing WSB file. I will load the file, WSB file I showed you previously, which enable or not networking printer. Click on networking printer WSB file, choose it, and option will be available there. I will choose networking to um, disable, okay. No map folder, no command, overview is okay. Now click on Save Existing Sandbox and run it. Your sandbox has been created and will be launched automatically. You can see that the Windows Sandbox is running in background. Okay, my Windows Sandbox is now running and you can see that the networking is disabled. So this tool may be useful for your WSB file creation with a quick little GUI and easy to use. Don't hesitate if you have any issues, question, or improvement to submit. Don't hesitate to contact me on my Twitter. Let's go back to the presentation. Okay, Sandbox and CSP or GPO. You can also configure default option of the Windows Sandbox with on-prem environment using GPO or cloud environment using Intune and CSP and also registry. It allows you to configure default Sandbox option on device. GPO part is to configure it with a GPO, go to Computer Part, Administrative Template, Windows Component, and Windows Sandbox. And you will see some options like allow audio input, allow clipboard sharing, allow networking, allow printer sharing, allow video inputs, etc. This is all options that we have seen in the Windows configuration file, meaning WSB file. And just set option to enable or not to enable those options directly on your device. For instance, if you don't want to enable networking by default on the Windows Sandbox when a user will run the Windows Sandbox, um, go to allow networking and set it to disable. You have the same with the Intune and the CSP part, which is located in Windows Sandbox. Choose the option like allow audio input, allow clipboard redirection, allow networking, and set value to 1 or 0. And with registry, registry part is located in HK local machine, software, policies, Microsoft, Windows Sandbox, and set the appropriate registry key, dword key to 1 or 0. Name of the registry dword key is allow audio input, allow networking, etc. Same as before. This could be really useful to configure the default option on your device, like networking for better security. Now, let's see how to configure the default sandbox, meaning the default image of the Windows Sandbox. By default, when you run a Windows Sandbox, you have a specific standard background, you have no shortcut, you have no program install, no registry configuration, etc. You can do this by modifying the VHDX file from the Windows Sandbox. For instance, you can add a specific background on your Windows Sandbox. And when you will run again the Windows Sandbox, this will be open automatically with this background. And not this file, this may be resetted after some Windows update. For this, the VHDX file is called base layer and is located in Program Data, Microsoft, Windows, Container, Base Image, and go to the GUID file. And you will see a base layer VHDX file. First, to open the default sandbox, you will first to stop a specific service called Container Manager Service. Service name is CM service. When you have stopped it, just double click on the base layer VHDX file to mount it. You can also do this with PowerShell, like this. Then, when you have opened the VHDX file, it will open a new Windows Explorer file like this, and you will have some possibility to access to default files of the Windows Sandbox. So go to the folder file, and you will have the Windows content. For instance, if you want to add some icon in the user desktop, go to user, username, desktop, etc. You can also add some PowerShell module by going to program file, Windows PowerShell module, etc. You can also change registry settings on the default Windows Sandbox. For instance, to change the Windows background, desktop background, to change the Windows PowerShell execution policy, etc. For this, on your host computer, open regedit, go to HK local machine, go to File, Load Hive, and browse to the to your and browse to the mounted drive into File, User, WDAG utility account, and select the NT-user dat file. Change what you want to change in the registry, like the background, then go to File and Unload Hive. And when you will open again the Windows Sandbox, this will open with the specific registry change. You can also automate all these things with PowerShell. Why? Oh, using the Windows Sandbox Explorer. It's a quick tool I created, a quick PowerShell script I created, allowing you to add specific folder structure, add registry key, etc. We will see this in a demo. Now, let's do this now, manual way and the PowerShell way. We will add a wallpaper, change the default execution policy, and also hide the news and interest from the taskbar, which is a bit annoying. First, I will go to Windows Service. There, choose Container Manager Service, click on Stop. Okay, click on OK. Now I will go to C Program Data, go Microsoft, Windows, Container, Base Image, CGUID, and I will mount the VHDX file, the default image of Windows Sandbox, and I have access on the default Windows Sandbox configuration, meaning like Explorer, go to User, OK, and I will create a new folder on the Sandbox user folder. Click on New Folder, OK, and I will click on my mounted volume, click on Eject. OK, now I will open again Windows Sandbox, and you will see that when you will run the Windows Sandbox, you will have your new folder on the desktop. So now Windows Sandbox is running and you can see the new folder directly on the Windows Sandbox. So let's add a background and remove the news and interest widget using PowerShell and the Windows Sandbox Explorer. We'll go to Sandbox Explorer and this is a file to run. Okay, we'll open with PowerShell, close it, okay, like this. Okay, Sandbox Explorer and choose content to add. So it works like this. Windows Sandbox runs the PS1 file and add content to add. What is the content to add? You have first the folder structure to add. There, I want to add a new folder in user in my desktop. So add a folder user, name of the user, desktop, and we will add a create folder Merry Christmas on the desktop. If you want to add something in program file, create a program file structure. If you want to add something in Windows, web, for instance, I want to add a background, so I will create a structure Windows, web, wallpaper, and add my wallpaper there. I will add a background with the festive tag calendar picture. So if you want to add folder structure, you will need to create the same structure of the Windows Sandbox. So now, there, and if you want to configure registry key, use XML file called sandbox registry content. It looks like this. I will create a new registry key node with a rec path of the registry part, their control panel desktop, property type, their string, and the property of the key, their wallpaper, and the rec value. This will be choose the wallpaper from the folder, say Windows Web Wallpaper Theme 1000. Now I will create a new registry key to remove the news and interest widget. So I will enable create a new registry key in software, Microsoft, Windows configuration feed, and the deworld key with shell feed taskbar view mode to value 2. So if you want to add some new registry content, just add a new registry key with rec path, rec property type, rec property, rec value. This is really simple to use. No. So in this example, I just want to add some registry part with background, change PowerShell execution policy, and remove hide news and interest widget, and add a new folder on the desktop. So I will choose this folder, my sandbox, go back to there, open the PS1 file, choose in the parameter content to add the path of the my sandbox folder, which will contain the folder structure. Then, when you added this folder, it will automatically check if there is an XML file for your registry part. So now, let's start it. This will stop the service, mount the VHD files in background like this, and do the change in registry, add folder structure, etc. Now, you can use your customized Windows Sandbox. And now my Windows Sandbox will be running with a new background and well, yeah, you can see the background, the new folder created on the desktop, and you can see that the Windows News and Interest widget is by default disabled. This is really cool. You can configure it approximately what you want on the default Windows Sandbox. No, Sandbox and Intune. It can be a good combo for your test. Why and how it can help you? You can also use Windows Sandbox to test deployment of Win32 application, test proactive remediation script or operational script, etc. Advantage is that after closing the Sandbox, the device will remain in Azure Intune. You can also test Intune things without needing a virtual machine or real device. How to do this? You can enroll on your Windows Sandbox by manual way using go to Access Worker School, click on Connect, and type your UPN, and then you will be enrolled in Intune automatically. Then go to your device and go in Program Data. You will find a folder called Intune Management Extension, and in Service Intune Management Extension, which allows you to run script application directly from Intune. And if you go to your tenant in Intune device, your Windows Sandbox will be listed there. When you close the Windows Sandbox, you of course can't do an action from Intune, but when you will run again the Windows Sandbox, um, if you unroll it again, you will be able to manage it again with Intune. And not things to note is when you run an unroll again the Windows Sandbox, it will keep the same device from Intune. You can first, for instance, deploy things like there in this example, I deploy a simple Win32 application. You can see the toast notification. And you can also automate the enrollment. How? We will use the Windows Configuration Designer to create a provisioning package. In this package, we'll authenticate using an account. This will create a token. Last step is to export the provisioning package to a ppkg file. The ppkg file, if you run it directly on the Windows Sandbox, it will unroll directly the Sandbox and Intune. If you want a full automated way, the solution is to create a configuration file, a WSB file, that will run just the ppkg file. Then, when you will run the WSB file, it will automatically unroll the Windows Sandbox in Intune in the background. Now, let's unroll Windows Sandbox in Intune. In this demo, we will choose the automated enrollment. We'll go to our file there, session for event, sorry. Just take another WSB file, and my Windows Sandbox configuration file, which be like this, language XML, and I will share the folder from my host computer, which contain my ppkg file, and I will just run a command, PowerShell command, that will install the ppkg file in background using the install provisioning package commandlet and the name of the ppkg file with the client install command. You can see on my blog a blog post I did about this and the full way to create from the Windows configuration designer, because it's a bit long, so I won't explain there, but you can see there on my blog. So now let's run this file. Run the WSB file, and this will run my Windows Sandbox with a new background. And if you go to account, could be a bit long to display something. Account, okay, manage access worker school, go there, and you can see that I am automatically enrolled in my Azure AD tenant. And you can see there add or remove provisioning package. If you go there, you can see that the Sandbox enrollment ppkg file has been executed. So this is a cool way to have a dedicated Windows Sandbox for your Intune tests. Now let's see another tool called RunInSandbox. RunInSandbox is a PowerShell tool I created, available on my GitHub, which allows you to create context menu on your host computer to run things directly on Windows Sandbox from a right click on a file. It will add context menu for PowerShell file, exe file, MSI file, IntuneWin, zip file, folder, ISO, ppkg, msx, and HTML URL file. This allows you to, for instance, run directly an exe from your host computer from a right click on the exe and running directly in Windows Sandbox. Run a ppkg file, run a specific URL, run an MSX file, run a VBS file, run a PS1 file as system or user, etc. This could be really useful to test things directly in Windows Sandbox with just one step. How it can help. You can, for instance, run exe MSI file directly from a right click, one PS1 VBS file as user, run a PS1 file as system to be in the same context than in Intune or MECM. You can also share directly a folder. If you go to a folder, do right click on the folder and you will have an option to share this folder directly in Windows Sandbox. You can also extract content of a zip or an ISO directly in Windows Sandbox by doing a right click on this file and choose the option extract content of the zip or ISO into Windows Sandbox. You can also run an Intune file, which is a file for Intune, and you can test the Intune file with the command directly in Windows Sandbox to check if the program you want to install is correctly installed or not. You can also run multiple applications or script in the same Windows Sandbox instead of run application one by one. How to install it? It's pretty simple. Go to your GitHub, to the GitHub link, download the zip file, extract the zip file, go to RunInSandbox master source, choose the sandbox config file, XML file, and choose option to configure for Windows Sandbox. You have the default Windows Sandbox option, networking, etc., audio input, etc., and context menu to add on your host computer. If you want to add a context menu for exe, MSI, PS1, VLBS, reg, MSX, ISO, etc. Set option to true to enable the context menu or to false to doesn't add a context menu for exe file, for instance. You can also choose no silent way when you run the add structure PS1 file with a silent parameter. It will prompt you a GUI with the context menu to choose to add. Note that you need to run the add structure file with the admin right. And this will create the context menu in background, and then you will be able to run directly things in Windows Sandbox with just one step. See the things in background. This will, when you run the add structure file, it will create a new RunInSandbox folder in program data, copy some file into it, create a new restore print, backup your existing registry content from HKCR, and add context menu in registry. How to remove now the RunInSandbox tool? Go to the source folder and run the remove structure PS1 file with admin right. Now let's see this in a demo. Of course, if you have any issues with the tool, like context menu not displaying, don't hesitate to contact me on my Twitter or open a new issue on the GitHub. Because with Windows 11 there are some difference, for instance for PowerShell, and the default tool didn't display context menu for PowerShell file, but now it has been resolved. But with Windows 11, you have some change, so you may have some issues now. But don't hesitate to contact me. I'm always aware of things to add. And of course, if you have any suggestion or feedback to add in this tool, don't hesitate to contact me. It will be a pleasure to add it. So now let's see it in the demo. I have already the RunInSandbox enabled on my computer, so I will choose some install file. This is an MSX file which will install the 7-zip manager file. Just go do a right click on the MSX file and click on Run MSX file in Sandbox. This will create a specific WSB file with the command line, which will run the Sandbox with the 7-zip install. And now Sandbox is running, and if you go to 7-zip, okay, if you go into 7-zip, you can see 7-zip file manager, which is this MSX file I want to add in my Windows Sandbox. Now, if you want to run a MSX file, for instance, MDG file, do right click on the file and click on Run MSX in Sandbox. This will prompt you a quick query allowing you to choose if you want to run the MSC file with silent install or not. Now let's do it by default. Click on Close, and when Windows Sandbox will be running, you will have the possibility to install MDG directly in the Windows Sandbox. Click on Next, Accept, Next, 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 Install. Finish. Okay. Go to Control Panel, and you will see MDT application. Now, I want to do this with silent mode. Click on Run MSC in Sandbox again, and in the procedure, add a silent command. I will add QN. Click on the plus button, and this will open the Windows Sandbox and install MDT in background. So go to Control Panel, click on Uninstall Program, and you can see that MDT has been silently installed on my Windows Sandbox. Now let's do the same with the next file. Notepad++. Click on the exe, click on Run exe in Sandbox. This will open again a quick query prompt, which allows you to choose if you want to install it silently or not. We will choose to install silently. Add the switch parameter. So now the Windows Sandbox has been running. Is now running. Go to Control Panel, and normally I should have my Notepad++ installed in background. Okay, Notepad++ is installed. We will now run a quick PowerShell file. Click on the test piece1 file. This file will display a message box with the name of the current logon user. Click on Run piece1 file and choose if you want to run piece1 file as system or user. We'll choose first user. Click on Run as user. And this will run my Windows Sandbox and display a message box with the name of the Windows Sandbox default user. Message box is coming. Okay, my message box is okay. Now I will do the same with a system account. Click on Run piece1 file, click Run piece1 as system. And now this will open my Windows Sandbox and display a message box with the name of system account. Script is being executed. Okay, I have now the message box with anti-authority system account. You can of course do the same with test VBS file, which will run a VBS with a message box there with Merry Christmas. You can also do extract a zip. Click on test zip and extract zip in Sandbox. This will open my Windows Sandbox, and my zip will be automatically extracted in my Windows Sandbox. on the background, on the desktop, sorry. There. So there, you can see my zip has been extracted in my Windows Sandbox. We'll do the same with a quick ISO. Go to download, choose an ISO file, do a right click on the ISO file, there, extract ISO file in Sandbox. And this will open my Windows Sandbox, create an extracted ISO on my desktop, and the ISO will be extracted directly in this folder, like this. Now, let's see how to install multiple applications in Windows Sandbox directly. For this, we will create a new folder, a new file called SDB app. This extension should be SDB application. And this file looks like an XML file. And add a new node called application with application you want to install. There, I will install different application like Notepad++, WinRAR, Screen2GIF, MDT, etc. Each node requires some field like name of the application, path of the application. This will share the folder you mentioned there, the file you want to run, and command line and if you want to run an silent switch or not. There, I will run some application in silent mode, and I will run the test PowerShell file without silent switch, so it will display the message box with the name of the current user. So go to the SDB app file and click on Test Application Bundle in Sandbox. This will then open my Windows Sandbox and install all the things mentioned in my SDB app file in background. Go to Control Panel. There, go to an install program, and you will see program install step by step. Notepad++, WinRAR, refresh program, Screen2GIF, okay, MDT now, not also the shortcut on background, up, and my message box with the name of the current user. So this could be really useful to have a specific Windows Sandbox environment with different program installed. For instance, to have a lab for a pen test or a lab for Intune, a lab for something you want with different program installed, instead of having a WSB file for each program. So I think I present you all things I want. So hoping I have been understandable and you enjoy the session. And don't hesitate to contact me if you have any question relative to Windows Sandbox or tool I present you. Bye bye.